Two heads, one tail. Yang Yin. Two heads, one tail, Yang Yin. Tails, one head. Yang Yang. Three heads, Old Yang. heads, one tail, young yin. Three tails, old yin. Read a passage from Vitality, Energy, Spirit, a Taoist source book. This comprehensive anthology traces the teaching on the three treasures, vitality, energy, and spirit, through the long history of Taoism. Along with brief selections from the classic texts of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, the book presents a rich selection of tales and sayings from Taoist literature, as well as a broad range of writings from the Complete Reality School. Discourses on the teachings of Wang Jie on sitting. Wang Jie, the real human, like multiplied sunlight, said that since your body becomes fatigued when you sit for a long time, it is unreasonable to do this, and it can even cause illness. As long as the mind does not stick to things, you can be imperturbable. This is the correct foundation of true stability. Using this for stabilization, the mind and energy are harmonized, becoming lighter and clearer the longer this is practiced. Using this as a test, you can tell right from wrong. If you can extinguish each arousal of mind, you will annihilate conscious cognition and enter into the steadiness of forgetting. If you let the mind get aroused and do not collect or control it, then you are no different from an ordinary person. If you only cut off the sense of good and bad and your mind is aimless, floating and roaming around arbitrarily, depending on self-stabilization, you are just fooling yourself in vain. If you engage in all sorts of activities and claim your mind is not influenced by them, this is very good talk, but quite wrong in practice. True learners are especially wary of this. Now, if you put a stop to delusions, but do not extinguish awareness, keep calm, but do not stick to voidness, practicing this with consistency, you will spontaneously attain true vision. In case you have doubts about something, go ahead and think it over, so that the matter can be settled and what is in doubt can be understood. This too is a correct basis for producing wisdom. Once you have understood, then stop thinking. If you go on thinking, you will harm essence by intellect, damaging the basis because of the offshoot. Though intellect may bring you distinction for a time, ultimately it will cause defect in the work of eternity. All toilsome rambling and random thoughts are to be dismissed as soon as you become aware of them. If you hear slander or praise, or anything good or bad, brush it all off right away. Don't take it into your mind. If you take it in, your mind will be full, and there will be no room for the Tao. Whatever you see and hear it as if you did not see or hear. Then right and wrong, good and bad will not enter your mind. When the mind does not take in externals, this is called emptying the mind. When the mind does not pursue externals, this is called pacifying the mind. When the mind is peaceful and empty, the Tao comes of itself to dwell therein. Emptying the mind. A classic says, if people can empty the mind and remain empty, without desiring the Tao comes of itself. Once the inner mind does not dwell fixedly on anything, outward action too is uncontrived. This is neither pure nor defiled, so there is nowhere for praise and censure to arise. It is neither knowledge nor ignorance, so gain and loss have no way to cause disturbance. In truth, one accords with the mean as the constant. Provisionally, one adapts to the time. At least one avoids entanglements. This is its wisdom. If you exercise thought and act insistently at an inappropriate time on an inappropriate matter and claim you are unattached, this is not real study. Why? The mind is like an eye. If even a tiny hair gets in an eye, the eye is uncomfortable. Similarly, if even a small matter concerns the mind will be disturbed. Once afflicted by disturbance, it is hard to concentrate. What is essential to practice the Tao is to get rid of afflictions. If afflictions are not removed, it is impossible to attain stability. This is like the case of a fertile field, which cannot produce good crops as long as the weeds are not cleared away. Cravings and ruminations are the weeds of the mind. If you do not clear them away, concentration and wisdom do not develop. The mind is used to resting on objects and not used to independence. If it is not placed on anything for a while, it finds it difficult to be at ease. Even if it is peaceful for a while, it again reverts to distraction, now aroused, now quiet. If you purposely cause it to be undisturbed, taming it perfectly over a long period of time, it will naturally become peaceful and at ease. Day and night, no matter what you are doing, you should attentively settle the mind. If you are not yet able to attain peace, then you should calmly nurture it, not letting anything vex you. Then you'll gain a little peace and relaxation, and so can be naturally comfortable. Gradually taming the mind, it will become increasingly clear and deep. Oxen and horses are domestic animals, but if you let them go free and do not restrain them, they will naturally become wild and will not submit to the harness. Hawks and falcons are wild birds, but if they are tied up by people and are always perched on the wrist, they naturally become tame. So it is with the mind. If you let it run wild and do not restrain it, it will grow increasingly coarse. How then will you be able to perceive that which is subtle? Being unaffected. Some say, those who practice the Tao are in the midst of things, but their minds are unaffected. Though involved in action, their spirits are undisturbed. There is nothing that they do not do, yet never are they perturbed. Now, if one only avoids activity and takes to calm, seeking stability apart from action, struggling to suppress and control, then whether there is movement or stillness, one single-mindedly sticks to keeping stationary. This produces the twin illnesses of grasping and rejection, totally unawares. Is it not a mistake to consider an external fixation to be an essential step on the way? The answer to this is that what we consider great is the totality of things, and what we call the way is penetration of things. To be in the midst of things without being affected, to deal with affairs without being disturbed, is truly great, truly wonderful. But there is something as yet unclear in the view expressed in this question. What is that? It is only seeing the result without understanding the process. Just as an enormous tree grows from a tiny sprout, the stabilization of the spirit and attainment of enlightenment comes about through accumulated practice. It is useless to speak only of the qualities of sages without knowing why they have such qualities. Simplifying affairs. For people practicing the way, nothing compares to simplifying affairs. Know what is essential. Discern relative importance. Understand what to leave and what to take. Whatever is not essential and not important, one should omit. For example, luxurious food and clothing, social distinction, and material riches are all extraneous likes of psychological desire, not good medicines that enhance life. When people pursue them, they bring about their own destruction. What could be more confused? Genuine observation. Genuine observation is the prescience of the wise, the perceptivity of the able. Every meal, every nap is a potential source of gain or loss. Every act, every word can be a basis of calamity or fortune. Skillfully holding the branch is not as good as clumsily preserving the root. Observing the root and knowing the branches is not a feeling of competitive haste. Collecting the mind and simplifying the affairs day by day, one reduces contrivance. When the body is calm and the mind uncluttered, only then can one observe the subtle. Nonetheless, the body that practices the way must be sustained by food and clothing. There are some matters that cannot be neglected, some things that cannot be abandoned. These you should accept with an open mind and manage with clear eyes. Don't consider them obstacles, lest your mind become anxious. If you become vexed and anxious over things, mental illness has already acted up. How could that be called peace of mind? Social relations and the necessities of life are a boat for us. If we want to cross the sea, we need the aid of a boat. How could we neglect food and clothing before we have yet crossed over? That which is unsubstantial is really not worth striving for. But in the process of freeing ourselves from that which is insubstantial, we cannot get rid of it all at once. Yet even though we work and strive, we should not think of gain and loss. Let the mind be always calm and steady, whether or not there is anything of concern. Seek the same as other people, but do not be greedy like other people. Get what others get, but do not hoard like others do. Without greed, there is no anxiety. Not hoarding, there is no loss. One is then like others in outward appearance, but the inner mind is always different from that of worldlings. These are basic essentials of speech and action, which should be rigorously practiced. The ills of materialism. If there is an illness that is hard to get rid of, even when one has cut off entanglements and simplified affairs, one should observe it objectively. If one is seriously affected by materialism, one should realize that infection by materialism is entirely due to thoughts. If thoughts do not arise, there is no concern with material things. One should know that when thoughts of material things are not projected outwardly, The materialistic mind is forgotten inwardly. Forgetting thoughts, the mind is empty. Who plays host to material things? A scripture says that forms are only imaginations, and imaginations are all empty. Why be concerned with forms? If you see other people doing evil and conceive aversion to them, that is like seeing people destroy themselves, stretching out their necks to the sword to kill themselves. They are doing evil on their own, and it is no business of yours. So why detest them? This is one's own mental illness. Not only should you not detest those who do evil, you should dislike those who do good. Why? Because they are obstructing the way. One's deeds are done by oneself, but destiny is bestowed by heaven. The relation of deeds to destiny is like shadows and echoes following form and sound. What is unavoidable should not be resented. Only the wise accurately perceive and accurately know this. They are pleased with heaven and aware of destiny. Therefore they do not grieve over the miseries of poverty and sickness. A classic says, "Heaven and earth cannot change their operation. Yin and yang cannot avert their misfortunes." In these terms, this is true destiny. How can we resent it? When a valiant warrior encounters brigands, he charges ahead, brandishing his sword, routing the enemy. Once his achievement is accomplished, his rewards last all his life. Now, when poverty and illness afflict our bodies, they are brigands. To immediately straighten the mind is to be a valiant warrior. When the burden of mental affliction is dispelled, this is victory in battle. Tranquility and eternal happiness are the rewards. Whenever painful things oppress our minds, if we do not oppose them, we will become burdened with anxiety. This is like someone who does not do battle with brigands, but turns tail and runs, only to be punished for flight. To give up happiness and take to misery, how can this be pitied? If you are afflicted by poverty and illness, consider this pain to proceed from having a body. Where can affliction abide? As a classic says, "When I have no body, how can I have any affliction?" Great stability. Great stability is the consummation of leaving mundanity, the elementary foundation of arrival at the Tao, the accomplishment of cultivation of tranquility, the completion of maintaining calm. The body is like a dead tree. The mind is like dead ashes. Neither grasping nor rejecting, it is the arrival of utter quiescence. There is no consciousness of stabilization, yet there is total stability. Therefore it is called great stability. Tzu said, "Those whose abode is great stability emanate the light of heaven." The abode is the mind. The light of heaven is wisdom. When emptiness and tranquility reach the extreme, then the Tao is present and wisdom arises. Wisdom comes from fundamental essence and is not a personal possession. Therefore, it is called the light of heaven. It is due to pollution and confusion by greed and craving that people become dull and muddled. When people are confused, wisdom does not arise. Once wisdom has arisen, one should treasure it and not let intellectualism damage stability. It is not that it is hard to produce wisdom. What is hard is to have wisdom but not use it. Since ancient times, there have been many people who have forgotten their bodies, but few who have forgotten their names. To have wisdom but not use it is to forget one's name. Few people in the world reach this, so it is considered difficult. If the highly placed can avoid arrogance and the wealthy can avoid extravagance, this is considered freedom from vulgar faults and is a way to preserve nobility and wealth. If one is stable and does not stir, is wise but does not use it, one thereby attains profound experience of true eternity. Tzu said, "To know the Tao is easy. Not to speak of it is hard. To know but not say is that whereby one becomes divine. To know and speak of it is that whereby one becomes human." People of old were divine, not human. He also said, "Those who cultivate the Tao in ancient times used calmness to nurture knowledge. Knowledge arose in them, but they didn't make anything of it. This is called using knowledge to nurture calm." Knowledge and calm nurture each other and emerge from the fundamental essence in harmony with universal principle. Calmness and knowledge are stability and wisdom. Harmony and universal principle are the Tao and its power. Having knowledge but not using it, one is peaceful and calm. When this builds up for a long time, it spontaneously develops one's Tao power. One will naturally reach a point where one is not startled even by thunder and lightning so powerful as to split a mountain. Not frightened even by swords clashing right in front of one's face. One sees fame and fortune are fleeting and knows the cycle of birth and death is like a running sore. If the will is exercised undividedly, then it solidifies the spirit. The intangible subtlety of the mind will be inconceivable. Attaining the Tao. The Tao is something miraculous. Spiritual, it has an essence. Empty, it has no form. It is unfathomable, whether we follow after it or go forth to meet it. It cannot be found in shadow or echo. No one knows why it is as it is. Supreme sages attained it in antiquity. It has been transmitted to the present by subtle means. The Tao has a profound power that gradually transforms the body and the spirit. The body is mastered along the way, becoming united with the spirit. One who has attained this is called a spiritual person. The essence of spirit is open and fluid. Its substance never changes or disappears. Because the body is mastered through the Tao, it has no birth or death. In concealment, the body is the same as spirit. Revealed, the spirit is the same as energy. This is how it is possible to walk on water and fire without harm, to cast no shadow in the sunlight or moonlight. Whether to remain alive or disappear is up to you at this point. There is no gap between leaving the world and entering the world. If even the body, which is material, can reach intangible sublimation, how much the more so can spiritual knowledge, which becomes more far-reaching as it grows deeper. The classic on the living spirit says, when the body and spirit are united, that become the true body. The scripture on rising in the West also says, body and mind join, thus making it possible to last forever. There are, however, differences in depth of power along the way of open non-reification. If the power is profound, it affects the body as well, but if it is shallow, it affects only the mind. One whose body is affected is a spiritual person. One whose mind is affected only gains intelligent awareness and cannot escape physical death. Why? Intelligence is a function of the mind. When used too much, the mind is fatigued. When one first gains a little wisdom, one is joyful and becomes loquacious. Spirit and energy leak out, so no spiritual light bathes the body, ultimately resulting in early death. Therefore, the Tao is hard to complete. This is what the classics call liberation from the corpse. Therefore, great people hide their light and conceal their brilliance. This is how they gain complete fulfillment. Stabilizing the spirit, taking good care of energy, they study the Tao unminding. When the spirit merges with the Tao, this is called attainment of the Tao. A classic says, those who assimilate themselves to the Tao are also absorbed by the Tao. In the mountains, there is a kind of jade that keeps plants and trees from withering. Similarly, if people embrace the Tao, it will keep their physical bodies strong. By steeping oneself in the Tao for a long time, one can transform substance so that it is the same as spirit, refine the body into something subtle, and merge with the Tao. Then the illumination of knowledge is boundless, and the body is infinitely transcendent. One makes the totality of matter and emptiness one's function. One sets aside creation in achieving realization. One adapts from reality without convention. This is the power of the Tao. Our bottom or inner trigram will be read as broken, broken, solid. This is the trigram of Gen Mountain. The mountain is still. It is a limit where you must stop. Gen brings each cycle to an end, defining a space where we can recognize, assimilate, and complete our experience. He creates a personal still center amid change, where we can retreat for perspective and a firm foundation for new growth. He is well-grounded, confident, and of independent spirit. He is still and knows. Mountain is the youngest son, child of maturity. In the cycle of directions and seasons, he is the northeast, late winter approaching spring, the pivot between cycles. Our top or outer trigram, our primary hexagram, will be read as solid, broken, broken. This is Zen thunder. Thunder is shock, upheaval, and the spark of the new. In old Chinese belief, thunder slept in the earth over winter and erupted from it in spring, awakening living things into new growth. Thunder is our basic drive for renewal. He inspires initiative and decisive action. He is the stimulus that sets things in motion. He is the eldest son in the trigram family, the first connection of heaven, potential, with earth, realization. Yang makes itself known here, emerging into the field and beginning to grow. Thunder belongs to the east and to spring. Zen thunder over Gen Mountain will give us a primary hexagram of 62. Once our changing lines transform to their young opposite, old yang will transform to young yin, old yin will transform to yang. So that will give us a top or outer trigram of broken, solid, which again is mountain, Gen mountain. That will give us a secondary hexagram of mountain above mountain, which is the hexagram (52). The way the answer to the question we bring to the I Ching works is understood when we understand how the parts of our reading work together. The general context of the question we bring to the I Ching is going to be, how can I act in creative relation with the spirits or forces shaping this moment of time? The key to understanding a reading is to know your way around its main components, how they fit together, and the different roles they play. If your reading includes changing lines, then you will need to understand primary hexagram, relating hexagram, and changing lines together. The two hexagrams in conversation with one another map out your whole answer. The primary hexagram shows you quite directly what your answer involves. The relating hexagram generally describes what the answer is about for you. It sets the primary hexagram in a broader context, an influence, a direction of travel, an underlying issue that has to do with you and your relationship to it all. If the two hexagrams map out a landscape for you, then the changing lines stick a pin in that map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. They are the immediate answer to your question. As the most specific, focused part of a reading, their message always takes precedence over all other elements. For example, the primary hexagram might describe a reassuringly secure situation, but a changing line could warn how insecure your position is within it. We will turn to the Taoist I Ching, written by I-ming in 1796 as a Taoist adept, and Thomas Cleary has translated it. The succinct definition of our primary hexagram 62 is predominance of the small, being fulfilled but acting empty, inwardly strong, outwardly yielding, inwardly firm, outwardly flexible. And 52, our supporting hexagram, is mountain, nurturing energy by quietude. We will start by reading the text section, which contains changing lines that we can read about, and then we will move to the commentary section, which doesn't. And so we will need to keep in mind that this first section we read from, getting to, at the end of it, the changing lines will help frame and deliver the most focused part of our reading. Once we move to the commentary section, that still is going to be very beneficial, but it's also still helping to frame the most focused part of our reading, which is contained in the text section, that being our changing lines. Our primary hexagram 62, predominance of the small. Predominance of the small is developmental, beneficial if correct. It is suitable for a small affair, but not for a great one. The call left by a flying bird should not rise but descend. This is very auspicious. Explanation. Predominance of the small means that yin exceeds yang. As for the qualities of the hexagram, above is thunder, active, and below is a mountain, still. Acting with restraint, basing action on stillness. Stillness is stable and action is not on a large scale. Also, in the body of the hexagram, 2 yangs are inside 4 yins. Inwardly fulfilled, outwardly empty. Inwardly firm, outwardly flexible. Using the small to nurture the great, it is therefore called predominance of the small. This hexagram represents being fulfilled and thus acting empty. It follows on the previous hexagram, discipline. In discipline, one can be joyful even in danger, inwardly being autonomous, using things of the world to practice the principles of the Tao, using social activities to restore celestial qualities. The foundation of life is stable. One can enter from striving into non-striving. In spiritual alchemy, before primordial true yang has been restored, one should empty the mind to seek to fill the belly. Once primordial true yang has returned, one should fill the belly and also empty the mind. The achievement of emptying the mind is the means to operate the natural true fire, to burn away the mundane energy of acquired conditioning until one is freed from it. This is why predominance of the small is developmental. However, though predominance of the small is developmental, it is only beneficial if correct. If it is not correct, it is not developmental. The correct way of predominance of the small is that action not stray from tranquility, that action be carried out with tranquility, with movement and stillness as one. The real person plunges into the profound depths, floating about yet keeping within the circle, neither indifferent nor obsessed, keeping a very subtle consistency. This is suitable for a small affair, but not a great one. A small affair means non-striving. A great affair means striving. Striving is the way to find yang. Non-striving is the way to nurture yang. Once one has filled the belly, it is appropriate that the small predominate to nurture yang. If you are capable of the great, but not the small, you will not only be unable to preserve yang, yang will even be damaged. Predominance of the small being beneficial when correct means it is beneficial in small action, but not in great action. Beneficial in small stillness, not in great stillness. When one acts yet is able to be still, being active in the midst of stillness, stopping in the appropriate place and acting on that, even as one acts, one does not go beyond the appropriate position. This is like the call left by a flying bird should not rise but descend. Though a bird flies up, its call goes down. This means action not straying from tranquility. Action not straying from tranquility should not rise but descend. The small predominating and nurturing the great. Extracting lead and adding mercury. Incubating for 10 months. When the spiritual embryo is completely developed, with a thunderous cry, the infant appears. When nurturance is sufficient, the auspicious outcome is great. The small predominates, but the good it does is great. Sublime and subtle indeed is the predominance of the small that is beneficially correct. And now to our supporting hexagram 52. Mountain. Stopping at the back, one does not have a body. Walking in the garden, one does not see a person. No fault. Explanation. Mountain represents stopping, stillness. In the body of the hexagram, one yang rests on top of two yins. The yang is above, the yin is below. Yang governs yin and yin obeys yang, so the celestial is not damaged by the mundane. Inwardly still and outwardly still, one stops inside and also stops outside. Because one's stillness pervades inside and outside, it is called mountain. This hexagram represents nurturing energy by quietude, discerning the good and holding fast to it. It follows on the previous hexagram, the cauldron. In the cauldron, one follows an initiatory process to produce illumination. Illumination comes from following the procedure. Illumination, reaching everywhere without becoming defective anywhere, refines the great elixir. But if you want to refine the great elixir, you cannot do so unless you discern the good and hold fast to it, staying in the proper place. Staying in the proper place does not mean empty inaction. The path has both action and stillness, and both action and stillness must stay in the proper place. In the qualities of the hexagram, the inner stopping means stillness, staying in the proper place, and the outer stopping means action, staying in the proper place. By stillness, you develop the abode of rest. By action, you test the abode of rest. By the former stopping, you reach the latter stopping. By the latter stopping, you master the former stopping. Action and stillness both end up in a single stillness. Stillness upon stillness, it is like the one stopping on the back of the other. Therefore, the text says, stopping at the back. Stopping on the back of stopping is acting from stillness, testing stillness with action. So action and stillness are one continuum. Then stillness does not become empty quietism, and action does not become unbridled indulgence. Action is none other than stillness, stillness none other than action. Stillness is of course still. Action too is still. Inside and outside are one stillness, staying in the proper place without shifting. Therefore, one does not have a body. Walking in the garden, one does not see a person. Not having a body means there is no self. Walking in the garden, not seeing a person, means there are no others. Ordinary people discriminate between self and others, inside and outside, because they have consciousness. When there is consciousness, there is self. When there is self, there are others. When there are self and others, one doesn't know where to stop. If one can stop at the back, then the consciousness of self and others sublimates. When there is no consciousness of self and others, then the human mentality leaves and the mind of Tao arrives. There is only one truth. Act and rest according to truth. In repose, you preserve correctness. Stillness is accomplished by realizing truth, not by the body. Resting in the proper place, inwardly you are unaware of having a body. In action, you act correctly, acting on truth, not in obedience to other people. Stopping in the proper place, outwardly you do not mind other people. With no self or others, having been able to stop inside, you can also stop outside. Active or still, according to the time, inwardly and outwardly in communion with the Tao, both action and stillness come forth from mindlessness. Through this one principle, all faults can be eliminated. If learners can apply their efforts to this double stilling, stopping in the proper place without wavering, then they will finish all tasks by this one attainment. Why worry that the gold elixir won't form or the great Tao will not be realized? We will now read our changing lines of our primary hexagram 62, Predominance of the Small. Our changing lines being line 4 and line 6. Line 4 and line 6 have the general context each of line 4, the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done. And line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Changing line 4 of hexagram 62. No fault. Do not dally with it too much. It is dangerous to go on. Caution is necessary. Don't persist forever. Explanation. Strong yet able to be flexible, already yin and yang have unified. The 5 elements have merged. Now is when you should await the time to transcend being and non-being. You should not remain too yielding anymore. If you don't stop at sufficiency and still use the path of yielding to go ahead, this is excess of the small and will invite the foreign energies of external influences, which is dangerous. This calls for caution. Being careful about this requires changing according to the time, not persisting in the same way forever. Stop when you should stop. Rest and stop the work. Act when you should act, to break the shell for spiritual transmutation. Proceeding from development to release, breaking through space, only then do you attain realization. This means predominance of the small should not be excessive. And changing line 6. Don't overstay here. The flying bird is gone. This is called calamity. Explanation. When one is ignorant, this is already predominance of the small. One should not stay here anymore. Excess in being ignorant and acting arbitrarily, listening to blind teachers, striving for elevation by conveying the vitality up to boost the brain, or conveying the energy up into the head, or keeping the thought on the point between the brows, or keeping the attention on the top of the brain, or silently paying court to the supreme God, or gazing into a mirror to get out of the body. Knowing how to go ahead but not how to withdraw, one is like a bird flying to the greatest heights, unable to stop itself, eventually experiencing calamity, from which none can rescue one. This is dwelling too long on a basis of predominance of the small. So the path of predominance of the small requires seeking yang by yin before the elixir is obtained, then temporarily using yin to nurture yang after the elixir is obtained. In any case, it requires that the small be correct. It will not do for the small to be either excessive or insufficient. Only then can it be developmental and beneficial. We will now turn to the commentary section, which does not have the changing lines. So we will note that the section we just read with changing lines is still our most focused point of our reading. Sticking a pin in the map to say you are here, or at least here are some places you may find yourself. You take precedence over all other elements. Our primary hexagram 62, excessive smallness. Thunder above, mountain below. There is thunder over a mountain, excessively small. Thus, the superior people are excessively differential in conduct, excessively sad in mourning, excessively frugal in consumption. Excessive smallness means excess in being small. Above is thunder, below is mountain. There is thunder over a mountain. When thunder is up in the sky, its sound reaches afar, but when thunder is over a mountain, its sound is muffled. This is the image of excessive smallness. What superior people see in this is that practitioners of the Tao should minimize themselves in their daily activities and not become too grand. This is because it is permissible to go to excess in being small, but not in being grand. Therefore, superior people are excessively differential in conduct, excessively sad in mourning, and excessively frugal in consumption. It is not right to be too differential in conduct, but when one is differential, one does not look down on people or become arrogant. So there is no harm in being excessively differential. It is not right to be too sad in mourning, but when one is sad, there is grief in the heart and one esteems nature and life, so there is no harm in being excessively sad. It is not right to be too frugal in consumption, but when one is frugal, one does not waste natural resources and is content with what one has, so there is no harm in being excessively frugal. These three things are all examples of excessive smallness, excessive without being too extreme. This is how it is with such small matters. When it comes to the great matter of nature and life, one must know the appropriate moments to advance and withdraw, to sustain and negate. One must know the principles of filling and emptying, effacing and fostering. Since even the slightest miss can result in enormous loss, no excess is permissible. In the image of the hexagram, there is thunder over a mountain. The mountain is still, the thunder is in movement. Action is carried forth by means of stillness. Action is based on stillness. Obviously, the small may be excessive, but the great may not be excessive. And supporting hexagram 52, mountains. Mountain above, mountain below. Joining mountains, Thus do superior people think without leaving their place. Mountains symbolize stability. With mountain above and below, one mountain joins another, and so on, so that 1,000 mountains, 10,000 mountains present a single image of stability. What superior people see in this is that the inherent goodness in people is the place wherein people are human, where they should remain all their lives and never leave for a moment. Therefore, they emulate the image of joining mountains and think without leaving their place. In both social and spiritual life, investigating truth and distinguishing right from wrong, people cannot dispense with thought. But if the thought is right, then they are in their place, while if the thought is wrong, they are out of place. It is important that all thoughts stop in their proper place and do not lose their original reality. If practitioners of the Tao are able to think in their place, the mind of Tao is ever present and the human mentality is forever quiescent. No external objects can influence them, so there is no harm to thought. Do-nothing quietists may say they forget about things and forget about their own bodies, not thinking at all. But this has nothing to do with the Tao of nature and life of body and mind, and is also one form of being out of place. Being in place means being immutable, stabilized in the right way. Thought that is properly stabilized encompasses all reason and responds to all things. Though one thing all day, never being out of place, it is as though there were no thought. Indeed, when you know the One, all tasks are done. If you do not know the One, then thought is out of place. How many students in the world know the One? We'll now turn to James Dekorne's take on each of our hexagrams, including our changing lines. I have left links to his site in the description box. Our primary hexagram 62 he calls small powers. Other titles might be predominance of the small, the symbol of excess in small things, the small get by, slight excess, small exceeding, small surpassing, excess of the small, small gains, conscientiousness, smallness and excess, exceeding the mean, proliferation of details. A quote from D.F. Hook. Like a bird, do not fly too high or attempt too much, because this will lead to disaster. Judgment, leg. Small powers indicates that there will be progress and attainment in small affairs, but not in great affairs. It will be advantageous to be firm and correct. It is like the song of a flying bird. It is better to descend than to ascend. In this way there will be good fortune. Blowfold, the small get by, success. Persistence in a righteous course brings reward. Small things can be accomplished now, but not great ones. When birds fly high, their singing is out of tune. The humble, but not the mighty, are favored now with great good fortune. To aim high now would be to put ourselves out of accord with the times. Lu, slight excess, success. Continuing is of benefit. Undertaking small things, not great things. The song of the flying bird. It is not good to go up, it is good to stay below. Great good fortune. Slight excess signifies the slight excess or small mistake that can prevent the achievement of great things. Ritzema/Carter, small exceeding, growing, harvesting trial, permitting small affairs, not permitting great affairs. Flying bird, abandonings sound, above not proper, below proper, the great significant. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of an overwhelming variety of encounters and details. It emphasizes that an excessive concern with adapting yourself to these inner and outer events is the adequate way to handle it. The image. Leg. The image of thunder above a hill forms small powers. The superior man, in accordance with this, in his conduct, exceeds in humility, in mourning exceeds in sorrow, and in his expenditure exceeds in economy. Wilhelm/Baines. Thunder on the mountain, the image of preponderance of the small. Thus, in his conduct, the superior man gives preponderance to reverence. In bereavement, he gives preponderance to grief. In his expenditures, he gives preponderance to thrift. The superior man derives an imperative from this image. He must always fix his eyes more closely and more directly on duty than does the ordinary man, even though this might make his behavior seem petty to the outside world. He is exceptionally conscientious in his actions. Blowfold. This hexagram symbolizes thunder over the mountains. The superior man now acts with too much reverence, experiences too much sorrow from bereavement, and is overly thrifty in satisfying his needs. Lu. Thunder over the mountains symbolizes slight excess. The superior man's conduct is overly humble. In mourning, he laments exceedingly, and he is stingy in his spending. Ritzema/Karcher, above mountain possessing thunder, small exceeding. A Chunsu, or chief son, or superior person, uses moving exceeding to reach to courtesy. A Chunsu uses losing exceeding to reach to mourning. A Chunsu uses availing of exceeding to reach to parsimony. Wu. Thunder rolls over the mountain. This is excess of the small. Thus the Junsi, or chief son, superior person, conducts himself with a little excess in respect to others, a little excess in sorrow at mourning, and a little excess in frugality in expenditure. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. In small powers, we see the magnetic lines exceeding the others and giving the intimation of progress and attainment. To be advantageous, such excesses must be associated with firm correctness and must always be in harmony with the requirements of the time. The magnetic lines are in the central places, and hence it is said that small excesses may be done in small affairs with good effect. Of the dynamic lines, one is not in its proper place, and the other is not central. Thus it is said that small excesses should not be done in great affairs. In the hexagram, we have the symbol of the flying bird, whose song reminds us that it is better to descend than ascend. To ascend is contrary to what is reasonable in the case, while to descend is natural and right. Leg. The meaning of this hexagram, in which an excess of yin lines prevails, may be grasped by contrasting its image with that of hexagram number 28, critical mass, in which an excess of yang lines prevails. Here, the idea is the prevalence of small or inferior powers, and the lesson to be learned is how to distinguish essentials from non-essentials. Is it ever good to deviate from the established course of procedure? The answer is that it is permissible only in small matters, but never in matters of import. Sometimes form may be dispensed with, but never substance, and the thing must always be done responsibly and with appropriate humility. The symbol of the bird is to teach humility. It is better for it to descend, keeping near to where it can perch and rest, than to ascend into the homeless regions of the upper air. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Ground your flights of fancy. The superior man bends over backwards to be correct. Small power shows the preceding figure of inner truth turned inside out. Here the magnetic lines are all on the outside, uncontained and uncontrolled. The hexagram often reflects a situation in which the archetypes, the passions, appetites, emotions, drives, and instincts have left their proper places within the psyche and are flying free like birds escaped from the zoo. Most of the lines either depict the danger of such a situation or warn about how to control it. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. In this inflated, compulsive state of identity, we and the drive are at our most harmful. The drive will unfold and we will act out its extreme, inappropriate, and destructive side. In the process, we get the worst of it, along with the other people involved. The wrong thing usually happens at the wrong time and in the wrong place. A capacity for moving toward differentiation and transforming the drive will not arise until the state of identity has been dissolved. This requires a confrontation of the drive as a thou, as something that is not I, as something separate from ourselves. Only at this point can the inner dialogue begin. Until then, the drive remains unconscious, primitive and destructive. Only after the identity has been dissolved by learning to experience the drive as an autonomous entity that is separate from the ego, do we get a chance to choose a right time and place and to develop the positive potential of the drive. Interestingly, the only line that seems to be correctly out of its cage is the second, suggesting a situation in which an intuitive inner wisdom takes proper precedence over the usual firm correctness of reason. We'll now read our supporting hexagram 52, which he calls Keeping Still. Other titles might be Mountain, Keeping Still, the symbol of checking and stopping, desisting, stilling, stillness, stoppage, bound, reposing, resting, meditation, non-action, stopping, arresting movement. A quote from D.F. Hook refers to meditation and yoga. Judgment, leg. When his repose is like the back and he loses all consciousness of self, when he walks in his courtyard and does not see the people, there will be no error. Blowfold, keeping the back so still as to seem virtually bodiless, or walking in the courtyard without noticing the people, there involves no error. Ritsuma/Karcher, bound, one's back, not catching one's individuality, moving one's chambers, not visualizing one's people, without fault. This hexagram describes your situation in terms of confronting a boundary or obstacle. It emphasizes that stopping and acknowledging the limit, the action of bound, is the adequate way to handle it. To be in accord with the time, you are told to stop. The image. Leg. The image of one mountain atop another forms keeping still. The superior man, in accordance with this, does not allow his thoughts to go beyond the duties of his immediate circumstances. Ritsuma/Karcher, joined mountains, bound. A Chansu uses pondering not to issue forth from one's situation. Chansu, again, is a chief son or superior person. Cleary, 2, the mountains are still, thus the thoughts of developed people are not out of place. Wu, one mountain overlapping another makes stoppage. Thus the Junsi, or chief son or superior person, does not contemplate things beyond his position. Confucius said, if you do not hold an office, do not give counsels on its administration. What he meant is not to volunteer counsels freely. On the other hand, if you are requested, then give the best you can. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. Keeping still means stopping. One rests when it is time to rest and acts when it is time to act. When action and rest occur at the proper times, one's behavior is enlightened. Keeping his back still, he rests in his proper place. The upper and lower lines of the hexagram all mirror each other, but are without any interaction. Hence it is said that he has no consciousness of ego. He does not see the persons in his courtyard, and there will be no error. Leg. 2 trigrams symbolizing mountain make up the hexagram of keeping still. Mountains rise up grandly from the surface of the earth, their huge masses resting on it in quiet and solemn majesty. They are barriers to the onward progress of the traveler. The attributes of this hexagram are both resting and arresting. It denotes the characteristic of resting in what is right in principle, right on the widest possible scale, in the absolute conception of the mind and in every possible position in which a man can be placed. As in hexagram number 31, initiative, the symbolism is taken from the different parts of the human body. According to Kong Hsi editors, the second sentence in the image should be translated, the superior man, in consequence with this, thinks anxiously how he shall not go beyond the duties of his position. Notes and paraphrases. Judgment. Wipe out imagination. Check desire. Extinguish appetite. Keep the ruling faculty in its own power. It's a quote from Marcus Aurelius. The superior man eliminates all distraction and concentrates on the matter at hand. A large portion of the work consists of nothing more than the will to keep still. Anyone who has ever tried it can attest that keeping still or doing nothing is probably the most difficult thing that a human can be asked to do. We are an ever-flowing fountain of restless desire. The senses are mindlessly programmed to encounter their objects, and when we prevent them from doing this, a great commotion occurs in the psyche. We are so accustomed to feeling our desires, drives, instincts, and appetites as integral to our awareness that we are seldom conscious of the fact that they are actually autonomous forces. as separate from the ego or choice-making complex as we are from other people, creatures, or objects in the physical world. Try controlling an ingrained habit such as smoking and observe how difficult it is to impose your will upon it. Who controls whom? A quote from Paracelsus in De Viribus Membrorum. The power of sight does not come from the eye. The power to hear does not come from the ear, nor the power to feel from the nerves. But it is the spirit of man that sees through the eye, and hears with the ear, and feels by means of the nerves. Wisdom and reason and thought are not contained in the brain, but they belong to the invisible and universal spirit which feels through the heart and thinks by means of the brain. All these powers are contained in the invisible universe and become manifest through material organs, and the material organs are their representatives and modify their mode of manifestation according to their material construction. Because a perfect manifestation of power can only take place in a perfectly constructed organ, and if the organ is faulty, the manifestation will be imperfect, but not the original power defective. The ego has only one legitimate function: to make choices. It is the switchboard in the psyche which directs where the energy of the instinctual powers shall go. If these autonomous forces are stronger than the will of the ego, they soon learn to get their way as often as possible. The main difference between an inferior and a superior man is that the latter has learned to control and direct his energies for a higher purpose. One of the best ways to acquire this ability is to learn the lessons inherent within keeping still. Quote from Roberto Osseagoli in Psychosynthesis. Psychoanalysis has demonstrated that the power of these images and complexes lies chiefly in the fact that we are unconscious of them, that we do not recognize them as such. When they are unmasked, understood, and resolved into their elements, they often cease to obsess us. In any case, we are then much better able to defend ourselves against them. The lines of the upper and lower trigrams are mirror images of each other, yet not one of them has a proper correlate. They don't connect with each other. This suggests the separation of the senses from their objects. For example, eyeballs are sensory receptors designed for the perception of light and form. Close your eyes and they are prevented from contacting the phenomena they were created to perceive. That the psychic entities attached to this desire to perceive phenomena might resist restriction is a foregone conclusion, but the ego has control over the eyelids, or should have. Not seeing the people in one's own courtyard means that one ignores one's autonomous impulses. Regulation of the psyche's autonomous manifestations in accordance with the will of the self is for the purpose of gaining a controlling influence over one's karma. As stated herein many times, you, as ego, are nothing more than a tool created by the self for the direction of its own destiny. A quote from Robert Svoboda in Agora 3, The Law of Karma. Both karma theory and quantum mechanics refuse to accept that observers can exist independent of the systems they observe. Spiritual science goes so far as to take the observer's own internal universe and its states as its experimental field. For it is within that field that karma is produced and stored. The matter from which we and our obstructions are created includes both the dense physical material from which our bodies are built and the thoughts, attitudes, and emotions that make up our minds. Tantric practice is karmic engineering within this field of name and form, orchestration of substance and action into result. First, you direct new causes against previous effects to nullify adverse influences on your awareness. Then you unleash yet further actions to negate the influence of the nullifying actions. How any ego could tackle such responsibilities with any hope of progress is impossible to imagine without the direction of the self. Keeping still certainly has its own karmic consequences, but when the not choosing implied in this hexagram is done in accordance with the self's will and intent, the results slowly lead to ever higher levels of awareness, eventually into realms beyond the physical. Give me just a second. Yes, I hear you. Luna caught a rat. All right. I'm going to go back over how any ego could tackle such responsibilities with any hope of progress is impossible to imagine without the direction of the self. Keeping still certainly has its own karmic consequences, but when the not choosing implied in this hexagram is done in accordance with the self's will and intent, the results slowly lead to ever higher levels of awareness, eventually into realms beyond the physical. That is what the work is all about. Any other choice is to lock ourselves into a continuous round of birth and death in physical manifestation. A quote from Rabbi David Cooper in God is a Verb. The Kabbalists teach that everything we do stirs up a corresponding energy in other realms of reality. Actions, words, or thoughts set up reverberations in the universe. The universe unfolds from moment to moment as a function of all the variables leading up to that moment. When we remain cognizant of this mystical system, we are careful about what we do, say, or even think, for we know that everything is interdependent. We know that seemingly insignificant gesture could have weighty consequences. A seemingly insignificant gesture. Suggestions for meditation. Notice that every line of this hexagram, except the last, deals with an inherent challenge involved in the discipline required to keep still. Compare the lines in keeping still with similar lines in hexagram 31, initiative. Back to hexagram 62, our primary hexagram to read, changing lines 4 and 6, which again have the general contexts of line 4, the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done, and line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Line 4, leg. The fourth line dynamic shows its subject falling into no error, but meeting the exigency of his situation without exceeding in his natural course. If he goes forward, there will be peril, and he must be cautious. There is no occasion to be using firmness perpetually. Wilhelm/Baines. No blame. He meets him without passing by. Going brings danger. One must be on guard. Do not act. Be constantly persevering. Hardness of character is tempered by yielding position, so that no mistakes are made. Blofeld. No error. Instead of passing him by, he accosts him. Advancing now entails dangers which have to be guarded against. This is not a time for action, but for unwavering determination. Cleary 2. No fault. Meeting here without excess. To go is dangerous. It is necessary to be cautious and not do it. Always be correct. Wu. There will be no blame when he encounters a chance meeting with someone without exceeding the spirit of small excess. Any excessive effort must be curtailed, nor it is proper to be persevering. Nor is it proper to be persevering, I'm sure is what that meant. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. The position is inappropriate for a dynamic line. If he goes forward with the result would be that his course would not be long pursued. Wilhelm/Baines. The place is not the appropriate one. Blofeld. Accosting someone instead of passing him by is now inappropriate, or is indicated by the unsuitable position of this line. The danger of going forward and the need for precaution implied that we should not continue long in our present course. Ritzema/Karcher. Situation not appropriate indeed. Going adversity necessarily warning. Completing not permitting. Long living indeed. Cleary 2. The position is not right. After all, it cannot last. Wu. This means that his position is improper because it will not last. Leg. Line 4 is dynamic, but the exercise of his strength is tempered by his position in a magnetic place. He is warned, however, to continue quiet and restrain himself. Notes and paraphrases. Su. The man exercises restraint and caution. He meets the exigencies of the situation without exceeding the natural bounds. Wing. Caution. Do not forge ahead toward your goals or force issues at this time. Stay low and remain inwardly persevering. Editor. The image portrays a dynamic minister who might be inclined to surpass his magnetic ruler, but who is counseled to temper his impulse to advance. He meets him without passing by, in Wilhelm's translation, is another way of saying not to ignore the danger in the situation. Leg's rendering, there is no occasion to be using firmness perpetually, Ritzema/Karcher's, no availing of perpetual trial, and Slofneses do not herewith determine permanently, all contradict Wilhelm, Blofeld, and Liu, who translate constant perseverance. The logic of the imagery and Confucian commentary argue for this latter rendering, though the circumstances of your query may leave the other interpretation open for consideration. Indeed, Cleary's Taoist and Buddhist translations offer each version. A quote from M.E. Harding in Psychic Energy. To put it in psychological terms, it is the unawareness of danger that constitutes the greatest threat to one who is assailed by an uprush of primitive libido from the unconscious. If he could see the threat or temptation clearly enough to call it by its true name, half the battle would be won. James Dekorne wraps line 4 up into two possible succinct definitions, A and B. A, don't get ahead of yourself or exceed your authority. Unilateral action is inappropriate. And B, modesty is the best policy. Now to changing line 6. Leg. The sixth line, magnetic, shows its subject not meeting the exigency of her situation and exceeding her proper course. It suggests the idea of a bird flying far aloft. There will be evil. The case is one of calamity and self-inflicted injury. Lu, he passes over someone, not meeting him. The birds fly away, misfortune. There will be disaster. Slofnessy, not meeting him but surpassing him. The flying bird is netted in it. Inauspicious. This is called calamitous imperfection. Cleary 1, Don't overstay here. The flying bird is gone. This is called calamity. Cleary 2. Flying birds leave. This is unfortunate. This is called calamity. Wu. He meets with no one even though he applies the spirit of small excess. Like a bird flying away from other birds, he is alone. Foreboding, it will be catastrophic. Commentary. Confucius/Leg. The position indicates the habit of domineering. Wilhelm/Baines. He is already arrogant. Blowfold. The first sentence suggests that we behave too arrogantly. Ritzema/Karcher. Climaxing, overbearing indeed. Cleary 2. Passing by without meeting is because of arrogance. Wu. Because he is too arrogant. Leg. Line 6 is magnetic at the top of the trigram of movement. She is possessed by the idea of the hexagram to an extreme degree and is incapable of keeping herself under restraint. Notes and paraphrases. Su. The man does not know how to control his preoccupation with trivia. His overshooting and restlessly pressing on bring disappointment and calamity to himself and his people. Wing. Your ambitions may be too great. In an aggressive attempt to reach an unrealistic goal, you will meet with disaster. Editor. Wilhelm and Blowfold both translate domineering as arrogance, thus creating an image of rising above one's proper station, exceeding the mean, through overconfidence or pride. If we accept the universal symbol of the bird as emblematic of thoughts or thought processes, the line becomes a commentary on the dangers of excessive intellectualism. Compare this line with the 6th line of hexagram number 56. A quote from E.C. Whitmont in The Symbolic Quest. Wherever there is identity, as we have seen, there is compulsiveness. When we are identical with a drive, we never question why we are moving or where we are going. There is only automatic response to an impulse. This state of compulsiveness, moreover, gives us the feeling of being carried by a tremendous force of energy, in much the same way that an automobile going at the speed of 80 miles an hour may give us a feeling of exhilaration. We are really going fast now. This exhilaration, this unquestioning feeling of assurance that I'm really going, I'm going fine and well, is called inflation. James Dekorne breaks line 6 down into one possible succinct definition. A. You have missed the mark. Arrogance or overconfidence have put your head in the clouds. We'll read the same from Hilary Barrett's I-ming, Walking Your Path, Creating Your Future. Hexagram 62 she calls Small Exceeding. Key questions. Do you need to cross a line? What small things can you do to meet the needs of the situation? How can you take even more care? Oracle. Small exceeding, creating success. Constancy bears fruit. Allows small works, does not allow great works. A bird in flight leaves its call. Going higher is not fitting. Coming down is fitting. Great good fortune. Exceeding or going past is a transition. The moment when you step over a line. And small exceeding means making this crossing in small ways, going beyond boundaries and structures, but paying close attention to them, always responding and adjusting like a humble traveler crossing over great mountains. This is a creative way to engage with the world, no matter how small you feel. You're in no position to realize great things all at once, but it is worthwhile to do the smaller things that are within your capacity, taking small steps with consistent purpose. Small exceeding is like a bird in flight, small, exposed and vulnerable as it crosses over a vast expanse of sky. It must come down and settle eventually, and even as it passes by and is gone, its call reminds you not to go against your nature and overreach yourself. For your own unique call to be heard, you need to fly closer to the ground and pay attention to details, creating a more sensitive connection with your world. When you come down to earth in this way, scaling down your aspirations, crossing over in small ways and doing small works, then you enjoy great good fortune. Image. Above the mountain is thunder, small exceeding. A noble one in actions exceeds in respect. In loss exceeds in mourning. In spending exceeds in economy. Distant thunder is heard far over the mountains. A noble one's actions rest on a firm knowledge of limits, but also go just a little beyond them, like the soft sound of the thunder carrying beyond its origins. He will do more than is expected of him to honor a transition, paying careful attention to what is irreversible and exceeding what might be considered sufficient and sensible in his response. So he shows more respect for all involved, mourns the losses more freely, and also takes more care over expenditure, making provision for the future. Sequence. Small exceeding follows from Hexagram 61, Inner Truth. To have trust naturally means acting on it, and so small exceeding follows. When you are filled with inner conviction, you are naturally moved to action. The truth you experienced inwardly becomes a message you must carry safely out into the world. And our supporting hexagram 52 she calls stilling. Key questions. What if there were nothing you had to do now? What if there were nowhere else you had to be? Where is your inner point of balance? Oracle. Stilling your back, not grasping yourself, moving in your rooms, not seeing your people, not a mistake. To still yourself is to come to rest in your own right place. It's not the opposite of motion, but of being pushed into motion by outside influences. Whether you move or stop is determined inwardly by your sense of the nature of the time. Attaining this kind of stillness means firmly, even stubbornly, resisting the forces that would disrupt your equilibrium. You hold yourself still as if in meditation. Don't seek to grasp yourself by hunting down your every thought. You can no more make them stop by force of will than you can make your back still by holding it with your hands. Instead of twisting and spinning in circles trying to grasp yourself, keep still. In the same way, you can move freely in your rooms or the chambers of your mind, which can be just as crowded, and simply not see the other people there, because you hold yourself still and do not resonate with them. Even if you feel as if you ought to be constantly sensitive to their presence and needs, in a time of stilling, it is no mistake to exclude all these things and be quiet within yourself. Image. Joined mountains, stilling. A noble one reflects and does not come forth from his situation. Whatever upheavals take place around it, the mountain is still. The noble one in his environment is like two mountains, joined together, present to one another, and not reacting. He is still inwardly and reflects. He is still outwardly, staying within his situation, not seeking to act on it or escape from it. Outer and inner stillness reinforce one another. Sequence. Stilling follows from Hexagram 51, shock. Things cannot end with stirring up, stop them. And so stilling follows, which means stopping. There's a natural alternation between change and stillness. And in human experience, a time of shock and reactions to reactions to reactions eventually needs to be stilled, change consolidated, and equilibrium restored. First, the drum is struck, and the spreading vibrations set the whole drum head quivering. Then you bring your hand down to damp the vibrations and still the drum. Back to our supporting hexagrams 62 to read our changing lines 4 and 6, which again have the general context. Line 4 of the capacity for action, asking how the work can be done, and line 6, beyond the main action, reviewing experience, asking what comes next. Line 4, no mistake, not going past, meeting it. Going on is dangerous, must be on guard. Do not use ever-flowing constancy. Even if you don't feel wholly secure, you are where you need to be. Rather than forging on through, you can make an authentic connection here. You meet with truth, and you need to respond to this encounter, ensuring that you meet the demands of the situation with precision and care. To go on regardless in just the same way as before would be dangerous. This is a time to take changing circumstances into account and know when to desist, rather than being doggedly true to your chosen way. And it is good to be prepared, as if with your weapons to hand, so that you can move confidently in any direction. And changing line 6, not meeting at all, going past it. Flying bird leaves, pitfall, rightly called calamity and blunder. You fail to connect with the situation and what it requires. Instead, you overextend yourself and attempt more than is sustainable. Like a flying bird that never rests. The bird leaves. The message you needed to hear is lost to you. You are out of touch with the reality and do not learn. The disaster that follows is partly because you didn't understand the situation clearly. We'll read chapters 58 and 74 out of the Tao Te Ching, translated by Jia Fu Fang and Jane English. Hexagram 58, chapter 58 in the Tao Te Ching. When the country is ruled with a light hand, the people are simple. When the country is ruled with severity, the people are cunning. Happiness is rooted in misery. Misery lurks beneath happiness. Who knows what the future holds? There is no honesty. Honesty becomes dishonest. Goodness becomes witchcraft. Man's bewitchment lasts for a long time. Therefore the sage is sharp but not cutting, pointed but not piercing, straightforward but not unrestrained, brilliant but not blinding. And 74. If men are not afraid to die, it is of no avail to threaten them with death. If men live in constant fear of dying, and if breaking the law means that a man will be killed, who will dare to break the law? There is always an official executioner. If you try to take his place, it is like trying to be a master carpenter and cutting wood. If you try to cut wood like a master carpenter, you will only hurt your hand. Mm-hmm.